24 hours. That was the average actuarial life expectancy of a Soviet reinforcement arriving in Stalingrad in October 1942. If you were a commissioned officer, the actuarial tables were slightly more generous. You could expect to survive 72 hours. But for the private soldier, the calculation was absolute. One single rotation of the Earth. In the broad scope of military history, unit attrition is usually measured in months or weeks. In the battle for the Volga, we measure it in minutes. When the 13th Guards Rifle Division crossed the river to reinforce the city, they brought 10,000 men. Within 1 week, barely 3,000 remained alive. That is a depreciation rate of 70% in 7 days. This is not warfare. This is industrial liquidation. To understand Stalingrad, one must stop looking at maps and start looking at ledgers. We must calculate the rate of consumption. At the height of the fighting, the Red Army was feeding approximately 10,000 new men into the city every week. The German Sixth Army was grinding them down at a rate of roughly 1,500 casualties per day. The mathematics were perfectly balanced on the razor's edge of total collapse. If the Soviets sent 8,000 men, the city falls. If they sent 12,000, the logistics collapse. They sent exactly enough to feed the machine without jamming the gears. This is the grim reality of the meat grinder. It was a statistical equilibrium maintained by the steady injection of biological capital. Here is the brutal mathematics of human value. In 1942, the cost to the Soviet state to train, equip, and transport a single infantryman to the Volga front was approximately 5,000 rubles. That investment, that 18 years of human growth and 3 months of basic training, was amortized over a functional lifespan of 1 day. The return on investment was nearly zero. The state was spending millions of rubles per hour to buy mere seconds of time. Compare this to the equipment. A T-34 tank took thousands of man-hours to build. A soldier took 9 months of gestation and 18 years of rearing. Yet, in the accounting of the Stavka, the tank was the asset to be preserved, and the man was the currency to be spent. When a tank commander burned to death, the loss on the ledger was the steel, not the flesh. The actuarial logic dictates that it is cheaper to replace a 19-year-old boy than a 76-millimeter main gun. This economic inversion created a battlefield where flesh was abundant and steel was precious. Let us examine the variables that dictated your probability of death. We can assign a percentage value to every threat vector in the ruined city. If you exposed your silhouette against the skyline for more than 3 seconds, the probability of sniper fire rose to near 100%. The German snipers were not just shooting to kill, they were shooting to lower the morale coefficient. But the bullet was only one variable. There was the artillery. In specific sectors of the tractor factory, the density of shrapnel per square meter reached 0.8 kilograms. The air itself was saturated with metal. Then, consider the environmental variables. As winter approached, the ambient temperature dropped to minus 30 degrees Celsius. A human body without adequate caloric intake loses heat rapidly. The average soldier was operating on a deficit of 1,500 calories per day. This creates a physiological decline curve. Every 24 hours, a soldier's reaction time slowed by 0.5% due to malnutrition and hypothermia. This sluggishness compounded his risk of being hit. It is a compound interest of mortality. If the sniper didn't get you, the mathematics of biology would. The probability of freezing to death if wounded and left immobile for more than 2 hours was 95%. In the cellars, typhus vectors carried by lice infected 30% of some units. You were fighting the Wehrmacht, the weather, and the microbiology of your own filth. But here is what nobody talks about. The geography of Stalingrad created a mathematical impossibility for survival. The Volga River is approximately 1 kilometer wide at Stalingrad. For the Soviet soldier, this body of water acted as a binary filter. Once you crossed from the east bank to the west bank, the probability of returning alive dropped to 0.0%. There was no retreat, not just because of policy, but because of physics. The ferry crossings were under constant Stuka bombardment. The casualty rate on the ferries alone was sometimes 50%, before the boots even touched the mud of the city. Furthermore, Stalin issued Order Number 227, not a step back. This introduced a new variable, the blocking detachments. If a soldier retreated, the probability of being executed by his own side rose to 100%. Therefore, the soldier was caught in a lethal pincer. Death in front of him from German lead, and death behind him from Soviet lead. The only variable he could control was how much he cost the Germans before he died. The objective shifted from survival to exchange rate. If a Soviet soldier could kill one German before dying, the exchange was 1-to-1. Given the Soviet manpower reserves, this was a winning formula. The cruelty of the math is that a 1-to-1 exchange ratio guaranteed a Soviet victory, even if it meant millions of dead Russians. The human element struggles to comprehend these numbers. The brain rejects the scale of the slaughter. We must look at the qualitative data, the diaries. These are not just letters. They are the final entries in a ledger that is about to close. A German lieutenant wrote in his diary on October 23, 1942, "Stalingrad is no longer a town. By day, it is an enormous cloud of burning, blinding smoke. It is a vast furnace lit by the reflection of the flames. And when night arrives, one of those scorching, howling, bleeding nights, the dogs plunge into the Volga and swim desperately to gain the other bank. The nights of Stalingrad are a terror for them. Animals flee this hell. The hardest stones cannot bear it for long. Only men endure." Contrast that with the testimony of a Red Army soldier, a sniper named Vasily Zaitsev, who understood the binary nature of the struggle. He wrote, "For us, there was no land beyond the Volga." This is not poetic. It is a statement of boundary conditions. The world ended at the riverbank. Another Soviet infantryman, observing the constant influx of replacements who would be dead by sunset, noted in his journal, "Everyone dies eventually. The only difference is that here you die before you have lived. We are not men anymore. We are sandbags made of meat." Yet amidst this statistical certainty of death, there were anomalies, outliers that defied the probability curve. Consider the case of Sergeant Pavlov and his platoon. They seized a 4-story apartment building in the city center. Statistically, they should have been overrun in 2 days. The German maps marked the building as a fortress. Pavlov and roughly 24 men held that house for 58 days. Let us run the numbers on Pavlov's house. In those 58 days, the Germans lost more men trying to take that single house than they lost taking the entire city of Paris in 1940. The casualty ratio at Pavlov's house was a statistical absurdity. Pavlov's men stacked German bodies like cordwood to use as defensive berms. The survival expectancy inside that house wasn't 24 hours. It was indefinite, provided the ammunition held out. This proves that while the aggregate math is undeniable, the individual variable, human will, can sometimes skew the graph. But even this anomaly served the greater equation. Every German soldier killing himself against Pavlov's walls was one less soldier attacking the industrial district. Pavlov was a force multiplier of 0.01% that yielded a return of 1,000%. The final truth is in the summation. When the battle ended in February 1943, the Axis forces had lost over 800,000 men. The Soviets had suffered 1.1 million casualties. The total exceeds nearly 2 million human beings in a single city. If you were to line up the corpses head to toe, they would stretch for 3,500 kilometers. The math is undeniable. The Red Army soldier did not win by being better trained. He did not win by having better equipment in the early days. He won because he was willing to accept a survival probability of 0. The Soviet Union spent human lives like water to rust the German war machine. The 24-hour life expectancy was not a failure of command. It was the calculated price of victory. The actuarial tables of Stalingrad prove that in total war, the most valuable resource is not oil or steel or gold. It is the infinite capacity for human suffering. If you enjoyed this, tap like and subscribe. It really helps. And drop a quick comment telling us where you're watching from. The United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, or anywhere else in the world. Your reply helps the video reach more people just like you.